Today, as we continue our conversation about healing grounds, we have Nathan Wright on the show. He's an herbalist, an activist, a water protector, and a tribal member here in Michigan, and he has been extremely gracious on this episode with sharing some of his indigenous stories that are very sacred to him and his culture. So I hope anyone listening understands what a precious and just really generous gift this is. So I hope you take this to heart. And also, I apologize ahead of time for my audio. For some reason, my microphone was not working, of course, when we went to record this episode, but luckily Nathan's is great. So yeah, I hope you enjoy. So Nathan, thank you so much for spending some time with us here today. I know that I've at least followed your work for a few years now, and you provide just so much information and wisdom, and honestly, like a lot of humor too, which is, I don't know, sort of a breath of fresh air. So thank you for being here. In your Facebook videos, you always start with a traditional Anishinaabeg reading, and I was wondering, just to kick this off, if you could share that here and kind of let us know what that means.
Sure. So traditionally, before we even speak any language, we would start out with this. Ani bojo gizusuwanene and dizakashi chakdorim bautin donjiba. So I introduce myself. My name is Spirit Man from the Sun. That's my spirit name. And I'm with the Crane Clan, and I'm from Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan. And my English name is Nathan Wright, and I'm here in Petoskey, Michigan. And I own a company called Herbalodge, and I'm also a water protector, and I operate a group called Mackinac Oday.
Thank you so much for sharing that. It's beautiful. And I kind of wanted to go along those lines of the land and your relationship with the land, and have you share a little bit about just your history and your family's history here.
Okay, sure. Well, I'll just do like a quick thing. First off, I'm Anishinaabeg, and that means like the first people, the original people. There's different translations for it, and that comprises of the Odawa, the Ojibwe, and the Potawatomi, which are down south, and the Ottawa are kind of in the middle, and then Chippewa or Ojibwe are kind of in the UP. It kind of varies. Each map is different. Also, time periods are different. But our story, we have a story called the migration story. And in a nutshell, this is the very short version of it. There's many versions of it, but this is the short one, just for the lack of time that we have. That we began our migration from the St. Lawrence Seaway at the opening. And that's when the clans were shown to us. That's where they came out of the ocean and showed themselves to us. And one of the clans that was in there was the Thunderbird clan, and it was so strong that it was hurting people, so it had to go back away. So we do have Thunder clan people that are still around, and they have that powerful existence. But at that time they went back away. So we started our migration into the inlands because we heard of a place where food grows on water, Manoman, which is wild rice. But during the time, we had these different stopping places. I think we have like a total of 6 or 7 stopping places. And every time we stopped, we would set up and we would live there. And we kept seeing this blue shell in the sky, which is what we call the Miga shell. It's a very sacred shell. And here's what's weird about that shell. That shell isn't from the Great Lakes area. It actually comes from the Southern Pacific. How the heck we got it? I mean, we probably traded for it, because there's no doubt there was trade routes going that far, but it was just fascinating to me how our most sacred shell, our most sacred thing, or one of them, wasn't even from the area. It was from the southern part of Hawaii, some area out in the Pacific Ocean like that. So, but also I wonder sometimes, I'm just adding this in to the story, that blue light. What was that blue light? It's like you think of like the Star of Bethlehem and stuff like that. Was that a star that was born, or was it alien intervention? They seen a group of people that were maybe exhausted the resources where they were at, and they needed to move to survive, and they didn't know where to go. They're in this vast forest near this water, and this light came on and like, go this way. So that's really fascinating. I wish the History Channel and not with an indigenous perspective and indigenous storytellers would do something on this and research, these time periods. Because all of this stuff, even though this is oral history, it's fact. There's truth to it. And there's a lot of archaeologists that confirm many oral stories that I've heard throughout my life. They've confirmed it at some point later on. So anyways, we moved in and we kept stopping at these different points: Montreal, Detroit, Mackinac, Sault Ste. Marie, La Pointe. I'm missing some there. But once we got to Sault Ste. Marie, that is where my tribe is from, the Sault Ste. Marie tribe of Chippewa Indians. And that's where we stayed until contact, colonialization, which happened right around 1687, I believe. That's when we started encountering. So that's the third oldest city in the United States. So at that time, we were doing fur trades and we're already working with the French. And actually, part of our migration, the French were coming down with us. And in some weird way, they were already kind of mingled in with us because they were, getting the fur trade, and we were developing friendships and relationships with them. There was a lot of intermarrying that was happening during that time. So we ended up there. So then, the colonialization happened, and the treaties were, they wanted to settle Michigan, the federal government. So they had to get a treaty signed. And this was right around 1836. And so they came over wanting to have the treaty signed so they could make Michigan a state, which it became a state in 1837. So different people were there to sign the treaty, and my great it's either 6 or 7 times, Shingwa Kantz, Little Pine, he was a member of the Grand Island Band. So he was over in the Munising area. He was also with the Mackinac tribe in Mackinac City briefly. He would use these alias names. He was different. I mean, like he used Augustine Bart on one of the treaties. He actually signed the Treaty of Saginaw, which is in Lower Michigan, which is really weird that he signed that, but he used a different name. He was a very powerful medicine person. There are some books that were written about him, and there's a lot of different authors who were around at that time who were documented some of his works and some of the things he did. But in a nutshell, Shingwa Kantz was a very disciplined, strong Madei, which is our religion. We call it the Madeiwan, but it's more of our spirituality. And he practiced fasting a lot. He believed that he could transform into animals and go visit places. And there's discussions on that he has. And he's seen the First Nations before it was developed. He's seen a gathering of all the nations in a big circle. Well, he was a bird when that happened.
Wow.
So he did all this stuff, and people like him are very gifted and magical, and to us, and they're connected to the Creator because they have these things that happen to them. Like it's almost like they have a kind of magic around them. And one of the things he did that I always like to share the story was that there were miners. So he ended up in Garden River because they signed the treaty here. Him and some of my relatives left because basically the British at the time, they were in control of Canada. They were giving Indians a better deal. So he decided to go up there, which is right across the border. I mean, he could still come over and visit family.
Mm-hmm.
So he took a cannon and shot it into this mining that was illegally mining on his reserve. And, I don't think he killed anyone, but he scared the heck out of them. That was the intent. They came running out of there. He ends up getting arrested. They take him down to Toronto. And then he hires an attorney, probably the first time in this area that an Indigenous person hired an attorney. And the attorney got him out. And the reason why is because, well, this was his land. He had every right to do that. He was defending his territory. And these guys were on there illegally. So, he came out and he was just really big on getting education. Like, he was aware that, as much as he loved his traditional lifestyle, he was also aware of the changes that were happening. So he was encouraging like a school, and they actually do have a school in his name up there in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario. So, he's been an inspiration for me in my life because of all the things that he's done, and also some of my other ancestors. When you hear like one of his sons worked for Hudson Bay, which is, a huge company that still actually exists under a different name.
Yeah.
But they took a canoe all the way from Sault Ste. Marie all the way up to the Arctic for an expedition. Now, I can't even imagine, even if I wanted to right now, doing that. Not only the physical aspect of it, but just the mental to do that and to know where to go. But, when I hear stories like this and I think about my life, or like even me just running through the measly old woods here with a cougar, to me, that's nothing. That's nothing compared to what they do.
The feats that they've accomplished and that you've just talked about now are just, they're amazing.
Exactly. So that was that's pretty much my dad was an activist. So we go down from Shingmont to my grandmother Delia Marie Mastaw. She was helping out this lady named Ethel Madison down in Pontiac, downstate, and they were trying to create what was called the Pontiac Sioux Band. My tribe was not federally recognized at that time, and it shouldn't be recognized. It should be reasserted. So the Indian reorganization occurred back in the late 20s or early 30s, and tribes started to file. Like, we're a tribe, we're going to file and try to get this federally acknowledged so we could get a reserve and we could provide for our people. So she was part of that, Delia Marie Mastaw, and then she passed away when my dad was 3 years old. She died of numeric poisoning. And then so he was inspired by that, because he heard about what she was doing. He was only 3. This was at a time when a lot of people didn't want to be Indian. There was a negative connotation. So when the 70s hit, he started going to Northern Michigan University, and he was the founding editor of Anishinaabeg News, which is the first regional Native American newspaper in the area. And that led him and me too on a trip of witnessing history as it happened. So I respect his bravery. I think my dad was inspired to do what no one else was doing at the time, or very few, to bring the culture back. And I think he was inspired by his mom that he, didn't know too well. But I think that's one of the reasons why he was so passionate about it. And then he also started some of the powwows, some of the first powwows that we had up in the Sioux in the 70s. He had a lot of help. I'm not saying he did it by himself.
Yeah.
But he would tell me, like, we didn't have any culture up there. We had to import it. We got culture all over now. We got the language, everything. Back then, we didn't have anything. A lot of younger people don't know that. They think, oh, this has always been like that. We had to recover it, and we're still recovering it.
Yeah, and you said so much great stuff there. So I kind of want to dive into maybe a little pieces here and there and just kind of elaborate. And you mentioned the migration story, and I think we're so blessed here in Michigan to have such a prominent Indigenous presence, especially in northern Michigan. No matter where you're from, I think you grow up with stories about the Sleeping Bear Sand Dunes and the Manitou Islands and, the singing sands of the Keweenaw. And so I think it's really important for people to know sort of the story of specific places and land and whatnot, because it kind of brings the spirit of a place to life and makes it seem like more than just a resource. It makes it seem like something that's living. And I think maybe if more people saw sort of the land in that light, they wouldn't destroy it as much as they do. So I was just kind of wondering, kind of going on the back of your migration story, if there were any sort of land-based legends or mythologies that you either grew up with or heard later on in life that really sort of resonate with you.
Sure. There's quite a number of stories, especially in different areas. Some are about, how mountains were created and, how this came to be. But one of the ones that resonates with the work I do with Mackinac Oday and Line 5 is the Great Turtle, the Great Turtle story, which is Mackinac Island, Michilimackinac. as we call it. That's a traditional name. And the way that story goes is that, similar to the Bible, where you have the great flood with Noah, well, we had our great flood too, and we have our great flood story. Except in our story, it was Nana Bujo who was the person. He's kind of like the legend that you hear a lot about. No one really knows for sure if he was real or if he was just somebody that was used to uh, tell these stories or to share this knowledge. But I believe he founded our culture. I believe with his, you know, concepts and things like that, because he's prevalent everywhere. Even in the language, he's there. So he was also known as a trickster too. Good sense of humor and everything. So the story is that he was in a big G-man, which is what we call canoe, and he had all these animals in it, just like Noah. Gigantic canoe. You know, and so they were out there for a long time, and I don't know the exact number of days or anything, but it got to the point where he was getting tired of it. So he felt that after this great flood that happened, all these rains, after they stopped for a while, that maybe we need to start sending animals down to try to get the dirt, the sand on the bottom, because if he had sand, because he was magical too, he could take that sand and do something with it. So right away, he asked for volunteers, and the different animals that could swim in the water said, "I'll go," and like the beaver he went down, and they're waiting for him and looking around, and the animals looking at each other. And the beaver comes up and he's breathing real hard. I couldn't find it, and then these different animals, they keep going down, volunteering, and they keep coming up, and they're like, I can't find it. And then, so in the background was this little muskrat, and he was kind of, hey, they're real tiny, he's like, hey, I could do it. And they're like, yeah, sure. They're skipping over him, of course, because they're thinking like, come on, guy, you can't go down that far. And finally, after everyone else had failed, they just looked at him and said, okay, we'll give it a try. So he dove down, and this time it was a really long time that, he didn't come up the same time the other animals did. And they were worried, they were starting worried, looking around. And then a long time had passed, and they started to realize something was wrong. And they were looking around. All of a sudden, one animal looks out. He's like, hey, he goes, there's something floating over there. Let's go over there. So they went over there, and there was that poor muskrat, and he was floating in the water. And Nana Bujo and all the animals felt really sad, that this animal had given up its life to doing this. So Nana Bujo, we're very sacred with the way we carry things and handle things. And he put him in his hand, and he gave a prayer for him. And he was very sad. And then when he looked really closely, he seen there was sand underneath the paws, and he got excited because he could take that sand now, and he could blow it and create what became Michilimackinac, what became Mackinac Island. Now we refer to the United States as being like the Turtle Island. So I don't know how that equates to Mackinac Island, which is shaped like a turtle. And if you look at a picture of the North America, it actually looks like a turtle. There's some pictures where they actually will show like a drawing where the paws were and everything, but that's kind of interesting. But that story is a very touching story to me, because I sometimes get emotionally, I have a hard time talking to, like, when the sacrifice that muskrat had made. And that's an example of what we do as Anishinaabeg, how we make sacrifices. Maybe not like death, even though that's probably happened for sure, but just how we sacrifice our lives for the betterment of our community. And that's, to me, what that whole story represents. That's my take on it.
Yeah, and I think for some context for people who might not be familiar, I think Line 3 definitely gets a lot more sort of national recognition, but there's also a pipeline that goes through Michigan, right across the Lower Peninsula, right through, like you said, the Straits and into the Upper Peninsula. and then into, so-called Canada. And also it's, so that's kind of where it's at and what's going on. And yeah, that's been there for what, since the 60s or
It's the 50s. I think they put it in right
50s.
right before the bridge, or right when the bridge was being built, right in the mid
Right.
50s.
Exactly. So yeah, that's kind of the situation here in Michigan, and you and Mackinac Oday and the water protectors are, I mean, a huge, like you're the forefront of the movement. So I was hoping maybe we could get a little bit into that and share with everyone a little bit more about Mackinac Oday and what you guys do, and what sort of struggles you're facing right now.
Sure. Well, we began this in June, and originally there was four of us. And water protectors come and go. There's different situations that happen, and so that's when it started. And then we came up with the name Heart of the Turtle, and then we got it translated to mean Mackinac Oday in the language. So originally back then, and there's a news article on this, Enbridge started spying on us. They hired a private investigator. And I had no idea. I didn't even know this was going on. They were following us. I was aware of that. They usually had these white trucks, but I was not aware of the spying until a reporter did an article and did a FOIA, Freedom of Information Act, and followed, and there's a lot of emails, and they're communicating with the local police. They're giving them like weekly reports. And one of the things that I found most disturbing was when they said they're planning on doing an event Labor Day weekend, and they were mainly speaking of the Water is Life, the paddle out protest, which we were involved in at that time, as far as participating. And they said that they're doing this event this weekend because of all the stuff that's happening throughout the country. And there was like, terrorist attacks, stuff like that. They said, we think, you should pay attention to that event in case something happens. And so the email was weaponizing the police, insinuating that we up until that point, and we still are, we're peaceful protectors, always have been, but they were insinuating that we were going to be violent. All the Quay, the women that are leaders over in Minnesota, they've all put their lives on the line. They're all warriors. They've all been arrested. Their attorneys, everything. They've all been arrested. Former vice president candidate Winona LaDuke, she was arrested and put in jail. So like I said, Minnesota's a different thing. Over there, there's more of that occurring. Here, that was the most comparable thing, was the valve turners that shut that the pipeline off in Vassar. One of the biggest things that we've done thus far was the eviction notice, which we work with Oil and Water Don't Mix and Great Lakes Water Protectors. And there was many other groups too from Minnesota, but we were the three groups that put it together here, the events that happened on the March 12th and 13th. And it was a very proud moment for not only the water protectors, but also the Anishinaabeg that were there, because I wanted them to come up, because this was an eviction. Even though they weren't technically going out, we were posting the paper, but it was a moment for us to show that we as Indigenous people are against this. And, if we have to use our treaty rights to win this, we're there, we're in support. That was the whole idea behind it. And it really came together great. Winona really helped out with that, because she brought her people down, lots of media coverage. I got so sick of seeing pictures of myself and everybody. I took a break. I mean, I think I looked at some of them just 2 weeks ago, but it was so overwhelming. Then later on, we met with the President of the United States. We got word of where he was going to be at. We're hearing that the president's about to come out. And then all of a sudden, this huge eagle,
Wow.
something out of a movie,
Wow.
it starts flying over. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, this couldn't be any perfect. I'm doing some live stream, and I think I got that on live stream. And right after that eagle did that, that's when Biden started coming down. And I met him twice. I met him once and shook his hand, and he said something like, remember Indian nations. And I didn't know what to say. I just responded and said, right on, brother. So people were giving me a heck, like, what do you do when you meet the president? I said, right on, brother.
I think it's perfect. I think that's perfect.
It was probably a lot more odder than what we realized because we were all we're in our regalia. I was wearing my ribbon shirts, and clearly we were indigenous Anishinaabeg people. We called ourselves the Anishinaabeg delegation. And traditionally, whenever the president would come to visit our area, traditionally our leaders would go there and welcome him. It doesn't mean we agreed with everything. It was just kind of a respect thing. And we were there not in agreement with president, but we weren't there and to be rude or anything.
Mm-hmm.
We did have signs that said shut down line 5. We were allowed to bring them in and we did display them. But this was the goal. This was actually better than the goal because we actually met the president. How
Mm-hmm.
many, protectors right now are out there saying, we want to send the message to the president. We want to write to the president. We met the president as an
Mm-hmm.
Anishinaabe delegation in our regalia. We were well received by the apple orchard there and the people that were there. They were very supportive. It seemed like everyone there was against line 5. So it was a great opportunity. So that was another one of those um, magic moments that we were involved in Mackinac Oday to raise awareness about line 5 and getting it shut down. So that's the kind of stuff we do. We do like these actions that are peaceful, yet we send a strong message. We're classy. We don't sit there and uh, there are times for that. There are times for the Standing Rock. There are times for what is happening with line 3. Well, we're in a different scenario here. We have to be more diplomatic. And so our thing is to raise awareness, get in the media, get the attention out there, watch them, which is what we do. You said we're boots on the ground. We're the closest
Mm-hmm.
group to line 5, which is true. So these are just the types of things that we do behind the scenes. Um, we're a flexible group, and we feel like we have to be, and we didn't want to get muddled down into being at a camp because that's good. That's good to do that, especially when they were building the pipeline. They could build these camps right over the pipeline and stuff like that. But in our case, it's just a different beast. Plus,
Mm-hmm.
we're up here in northern Michigan. It's not really well populated, so it's really hard to get a lot of people
Right.
to these events. That's why having 500 people in Mackinac City, for the eviction notice was huge for us, which it brought national attention to. So that's basically what Mackinac Oday does and what we continue to do.
I think more and more people are kind of swaying to the side, realizing how delicate the Great Lakes watershed and the water systems here really are. And of course, the tribes already know that, have known that for centuries. But I think people are finally starting to realize that having a pipeline going right under this precious water source is very dangerous. And I think a great thing that kind of demonstrates this, you kind of mentioned it earlier, was the wild rice, which grows on the water. And I was wondering maybe if we could talk a little bit about that sort of crop so that people can get an idea of, just how delicate sort of that ecosystem is and how important the wild rice is to the indigenous people here too.
Sure, sure. And as I mentioned earlier in our migration story, that's one of the reasons why we migrated here, because food grows on water. And we didn't know what that meant when we were coming here. And we found out, it's so wild rice is a species indicator. It indicates clean water. So when you see that growing in your lakes, that's a really good sign. Um, so we harvest this every year, August, September, and there's not a lot of us that harvest, but we go to the places where the gardens that our ancestors planted or took care of, and we go to these exact same places and we harvest from them. We also have been working over the decades. One of the big people here in Michigan that have really spurred this was Lee Sprague, who started replanting the rice in these different lakes where for whatever reason the rice left. So he brought them back and restored them, and we continue to do that. So some of the rice we harvest is actually used to continue the restoration, so we could have more of these. So obviously the quality of water is a very big concern for the tribes here in Michigan and other Great Lakes area like Minnesota. And that is why all tribes in Michigan are opposed to Line 5.
The guiding force here is, of course, the land. And, as I mentioned earlier, I'm really kind of focusing on sort of the importance of land and finding home. Yeah, do you have any advice for people who feel kind of lost or out of place?
So we get asked that question a lot about connections to the lands. And what someone had told me that made sense to me is the way we are as indigenous people, it's like we're the land owners. And then mainstream, and I'm not saying everybody, but just mainstream in its direction are like, they're like renters. You know, like they don't have that connection that we have. You know what I mean? It is something significant when you could stand on land and say that my family's been here for thousands of years. So with that being said, we are taught that it's not our right, it's our responsibility to care for the lands. And that's the way we were raised, and that's what we believe. So it amazes us when other people don't get that. Like it really doesn't make sense to us because you know, whenever you hear someone say, "Oh God, I have this right to do this," you know, to us that's like disrespecting Mother Nature. If you're referring to Mother Nature, I have the right to do this. I have the right to do that. Thankfully, we have a lot of allies, and there's a lot of great people out there, great organizations that carry on that belief. To connect, you have to spend time with the land, but in a simplest form, just to try to explain it off the top of my head how I do it. Well, for one, I know the history. I learned the history. You know, I read books about what happened here. I read, you know, about my ancestors, so that helps out. Reading books, or you know, learning about the land that you live on, so you know the history. That's always good. But when I go, I kind of feel like I'm a part of it, and I'm not the master. I'm not in charge. I'm there with everything, and I'm there with the wind. I'm there with the moving changes. When the wind moves, I move. Um, when the leaves fall, you know, I maybe fall with them, you know, and I don't take anything for granted. I'm very thankful that I exist, that I'm here to observe some of these beautiful things. There's a lot of times when I've been out there in the woods and there was a bad storm or something, and then the sun came out and it just shined through some conifer tree, like balsam tree or something, and it just was so beautiful, and the little mist of the snow around it, it was just so picturesque that I was in such awe. I've been in awe so many times like that I couldn't even pull out my camera to take a picture because it was so beautiful. And so when you have those types of experiences and those types of connections, um, you know, you start to learn the language of Mother Earth, the trees, and one of the ways I like to talk about like trees talking to you is they make popping sounds. You know, and there could be reasons for this. It could be just the bark, but the way I take it, when I hear a popping sound and I'm walking by a tree, I'll go look around the tree because I think the tree is telling me something. And I would say 9 times out of 10, I'll find something. I might find some mushrooms. I might find some plant that I was looking for, or I might find a plant that I need to learn about. So, I mean, I guess that's the best way to put it in a nutshell. I might have done in other interviews I've had, I might have expressed it a little better, but that's just and for the advice of like what people can do to connect to lands. I mean, some people can maybe learn about their own ancestry and go visit those places. I mean, I got some Irish in me, and I got some French in me. And, you know, if I ever went to Ireland, I would probably want to maybe visit some of the places where my family's from just to experience that. I would be honored to, you know, but I identify primarily with my indigenous culture.
Yeah.
But that's why, you know, one of my herbalist mentors, she said that when we're teaching people about our herbalism, our indigenous herbalism, it's like a placeholder. It's a placeholder for them to maybe learn a little bit about plants, but then for them to hopefully learn about their own culture and their own plants. Because see, what we've done is we've restored our culture. And so this is why we're protective of it, because we did a lot of work to bring it back. And we don't want people kind of taking it. You know, there indigenous cultures exist all around the world. everywhere everyone can tie back to an indigenous culture. So why not do that? Because I love indigenous cultures because we all have similarities, believe it or not. We have really bizarre, close things. You know, the drums are probably one of the biggest things. But there's someone sent me a picture, I think it was Scottish or Irish, I think Scottish. They have sweats. They have sweat lodges that are built out of earth. And I didn't know that. I'm like, wow,
Yeah.
that's cool. There was another video online of a Middle Eastern dance group. They were dancing with either Lakota or another indigenous group, and their dance movements that they've been doing for hundreds of years were identical. They were identical, and they would do it, and it was the same, you know, step. The move, you know, there was just a little bit of variance, but it was the same move, and it just blew my mind. Like, wow, this falls in line with our teachings that the Creator took the four different groups, the four, because you know, we have the four directions, the four colors: yellow, white, black, and red. They also mean people in our teachings: the red man, the black man, the yellow man, the white man, and these are just our teachings. And the Creator, what we believe happened when the world was made, the Creator gave each one of us these instructions of how to live and how to be, and then sent us off to these different parts of the world. And we believe the reason why a lot of people are drawn to indigenous spirituality in that is because it's true, it's unadulterated, it's true from the Creator. It doesn't have kings or that change things or rewrote things or, you know, modified it so there's more government control. That's why I think people resonate with it. But we also, you know, we're kind of like holding, like I said, holding the place, or a placeholder. So now you connected to what it's like. Now you can go back to and find your original teachings, because we want that, because we believe the original teachings for all people on this planet, if we all do them, we're going to be in a better world.
The reason for cultural appropriation is because people don't understand themselves. They don't understand,
Right.
you know, what their own roots are. So they sort of gravitate towards the closest thing, which is obviously not okay.
I mean, you know, we don't want to come across as prudes or anything like that, because we have people in our communities that are non-indigenous, that are part of our community, that we don't view as being an outsider. They're a part of our community, but they also know the protocols, you know, like they know they could be like a helper and not like the instructor. Like, for example, like a sweat lodge, they could help out in a sweat lodge, but they couldn't conduct the sweat lodge. That would have to be an indigenous person. So they know those rules and they respect that. But we also we married into, and they're part of the community too. You know, let our drums come to our drums and let them heal you. You know, come to a powwow, come to an event, learn about it. We're not prudes at that. We're not telling people not to enjoy our culture. We're just saying don't take it from us. That's all we're saying. You know, you could be a part of it for sure. You could learn how to offer tobacco for sure. In this area, that's acceptable. There's 573 tribes in the United States. So other areas, they might feel differently about that. But in our area, you know, I asked an elder about that, like, you know, should non-Indian people be able to offer tobacco? And they said, well, Creator told us when we were here on these lands, this is our protocol. So why wouldn't that apply to anyone else on that land? And I was like, there's a lot to be proud of. There's a lot to be proud of.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I mean, this has just been an amazing conversation, first of all. And, you know, we've kind of been over the fact that you're a water protector, you're an activist, and you're an herbalist as well. So maybe you could just let everybody know where they can find you, how they can support you, maybe a little bit about Herbal Lodge and things like that, just so we can close that all up.
Sure. Well, okay. So first off, I have a business. It's called Herbal Lodge, and this is what pays my bills. And that is www.herballodge.com. That's 2 L's, HERBALLODGE.com. So if you want to check out, we got a pain relief product, muscle pain, joint pain, arthritis, one for nerve damage, Minigan nerve, and then one for dry skin, Nojamak, cracked hands, cracked feet, chaga mushroom tea, and also a nerve damage tea, www.herbalodge.com. The other, the Line 5 group is Mackinac Oday, MACKINAWODE, and there's a Facebook page. You want to go to the one with all the women on it. We have an old one that we're moving from. And the new one, there's like 6 different women at the top. That's the one you want to join. That one we constantly update, and we basically bring awareness to what is happening with Line 5 and what we could do, any actions or events we post there as well. And then there's a bunch of other stuff I do, but you could go to my Facebook page, Nathan, just look up Nathan Wright Petoskey. And if I don't accept you right away, because I get a lot of requests, just maybe send me a message saying, hey, I heard you on this program or whatever, so I know what you are and what you're about. And eventually we're going to have some YouTube channels. I'm working on putting that together right now with some of the cultural teachings, as well as the indigenous herbalism, and just general advice about life itself. So.
Wow, awesome. Thank you so much, Nathan. This has been enlightening and just a really enjoyable conversation. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Nathan has also generously shared a discount code for those listening to this podcast. It is 15% off of all products on his Herbal Lodge website, and that will be valid until January 31st of 2022, and the discount code is VAL15. That's VAL15. Nathan and I thank you both for listening today. And one of those things that came to me after this conversation, of course, was when Nathan was talking about the migration story and that blue light in the sky. Of course, nobody knows what that was, but it got me to thinking that there have been many reports of earlier societies of civilizations noticing actually the death of stars, exploding stars in the sky that would last for months at a time, just this giant bright light in the sky from galaxies far, far away. And that's been, reported throughout the centuries, from Egypt to the Nordic areas and countries. So who knows? It could have been one of those sightings of a dying star. And so that was a really exciting thing to sort of connect to other places in the world. That concludes our conversation about the healing grounds this month. Next month, we'll start a new topic about grandmother medicine, which I am so excited about. So until then, my friends, take care and stay safe.